And now we turn again to the classics in our book at bedtime as David Horovitch continues reading the history of the Peloponnesian War by the ancient Greek historian Thucydides, charting 3 brutal decades of war between Athens and Sparta during the 5th century BC. Tonight, a cruel ultimatum and a reckless decision to conquer Sicily as Athens flexes its muscles once more. But first, an introduction from the Abridger, Tom Holland.
In the spring of 421 BC, after a bloody decade of war, Athens and Sparta signed a truce. Both cities were exhausted. Both cities had found it impossible to land a decisive blow. Nevertheless, even though peace between them was supposed to last for 50 years, the circumstances that had first led to war were barely altered. Sparta remained jealous of Athens, and Athens remained determined to throw her weight around. Sure enough, in 416 BC, she fixed her greedy and acquisitive eye on the tiny island of Melos.
The Melians are a colony from Sparta. They had refused to join the Athenian Empire like the other islanders, and at first had remained neutral without helping either side. But afterwards, when the Athenians had brought force to bear on them by laying waste their land, they had become open enemies of Athens. So the Athenians made an expedition against them. They landed on the island, and then, before doing any harm to the land, sent representatives to negotiate. They spoke to the Melian governing body as follows. "We, on our side, do not intend to bother with fine phrases. We do not say, for example, that we have a right to our empire because we defeated the Persians, or that we have come against you now because of the injuries you have done us. A great mass of words that nobody would believe. And we ask you, on your side, not to imagine that you will influence us by saying that you, though a colony of Sparta, have not joined Sparta in the war, or that you have never done us any harm. Instead, we recommend that you should try to get what it is possible for you to get, bearing in mind that the strong do what they have the power to do, and the weak accept what they have to accept. We do not want any trouble in bringing you into our empire, and we want you to be spared for the good both of yourselves and of ourselves." "So you would not agree to our being neutral, friends instead of enemies, but allies of neither side?" "No, because it is not so much your hostility that injures us. It is rather the case that if we were on friendly terms with you, our subjects would regard that as a sign of weakness in us, whereas your hatred is evidence of our power." "It is difficult," the Melians acknowledged, "and you may be sure that we know it, for us to oppose your power and fortune. Nevertheless, we trust that the gods will give us fortune as good as yours, because we are standing for what is right against what is wrong." "So far as the favour of the gods is concerned," the Athenians replied, "we think we have as much right to that as you have. Our aims and our actions are perfectly consistent with the beliefs men hold about the gods and with the principles which govern their own conduct. Our opinion of the gods and our knowledge of men lead us to conclude that it is a general and necessary law of nature to rule whatever one can. That is not a law that we made ourselves, nor were we the first to act upon it when it was made. We found it already in existence, and we shall leave it to exist forever among those who come after us. We are merely acting in accordance with it, and we know that you or anybody else with the same power as ours would be acting in precisely the same way. Oh, there is nothing disgraceful in giving way to the greatest city in Greece when she is offering you such reasonable terms. Alliance on a tribute-paying basis, and liberty to enjoy your own property. Think it over again, then, when we have withdrawn from the meeting, and let this be a point that constantly recurs to your minds, that you are discussing the fate of your country, that you have only one country, and that its future, for good or ill, depends on this one single decision which you are going to make. The Athenians then withdrew from the discussion. The Melians, left to themselves, reached a conclusion which was much the same as they had indicated in their previous replies. Our decision, Athenians, is that we are not prepared to give up in a short moment the liberty which our city has enjoyed from its foundation for 700 years. We put our trust in the fortune that the gods will send, and which has saved us up to now, and in the help of the Spartans. Very well, answered the Athenians. As you have staked most on and trusted most in Spartans' luck and hopes, so in all these you will find yourselves most completely deluded. The Athenian representatives then went back to the army, and the Athenian generals, finding that the Melians would not submit, immediately commenced hostilities and built a wall completely round the city of Melos. All summer the Melians held out. As a result of this, another force came out from Athens. Siege operations were now carried on vigorously, and, as there was also some treachery from inside, the Melians surrendered unconditionally to the Athenians, who put to death all the men of military age whom they took, and sold the women and children as slaves. Melos itself they took over for themselves, sending out later a colony of 500 men. In the same winter, the Athenians resolved to sail against Sicily with a massive force, and, if possible, to conquer it. They were, for the most part, ignorant of the size of the island and of the numbers of its inhabitants, both Greek and native, and they did not realize that they were taking on a war of almost the same magnitude as their war against the Spartans. They voted in favour of sending 60 ships to Sicily, and appointed as commanders with full powers Alcibiades, the son of Clinias, Nicias, the son of Niceratus, and Lamachus, the son of Xenophanes. Nicias had not wanted to be chosen for the command, since in his view the city was making a terrible mistake. Alcibiades, by contrast, was its most ardent supporter. He wanted to oppose Nicias, with whom he had never seen eye to eye in politics. Stronger motives still were his desire to hold the command, and his hope that it would be through him that Sicily would be conquered, successes which would at the same time bring him personally both wealth and honour. For he was very much in the public eye, and his enthusiasm for horse breeding and other extravagances went beyond what his fortune could supply. It was for this reason that he urged the Athenians to attack Syracuse, the leading city in Sicily, and to establish their supremacy over the whole island. The fact is, he urged, that we have reached a stage where we are forced to plan new conquests, because there is a danger that we ourselves may fall under the power of others, unless others are in our power. After listening to him, the Athenians became even more eager than before to make the expedition. There was a passion for it which affected everyone alike. The result of this excessive enthusiasm of the majority was that the few who actually were opposed to the expedition were afraid of being thought unpatriotic if they voted against it, and therefore kept quiet. While these preparations were going on, it was found that in one night nearly all the stone herms in the city had had their faces disfigured by being cut about. These are a national institution, the well-known square-cut figures, of which there are great numbers in the porches of private houses. No one knew who had done it, but the whole affair was taken very seriously, as it was regarded as an omen for the expedition, and at the same time as evidence of a revolutionary conspiracy to overthrow the democracy. One of those accused was Alcibiades, who had been appointed to the command against Syracuse, and this charge was taken up by those who disliked him, who exaggerated the whole affair and made all the noise they could about it. Alcibiades denied the charges made against him on the spot, and was prepared to stand his trial before sailing on the expedition. But his enemies were afraid that if that happened, he would have the goodwill of the army, and the people would be lenient to him. Their plan was to bring some more serious accusation against him, which they could do all the more easily when he was away, and then to send for him and bring him back to stand his trial. It was decided, therefore, that Alcibiades should sail. After this, when it was already midsummer, they put to sea for Sicily. The Athenians went down to Piraeus at dawn on the day appointed, and manned the ships for putting out to sea. The rest of the people, in fact almost the entire population of Athens, citizens and foreigners, went down to Piraeus with them. They came full of hope and full of lamentation at the same time, thinking of the conquests that might be made, and thinking, too, of those whom they might never see again, considering the long voyage on which they were going from their own country. At this moment, when they were really on the point of parting from each other with all the risks ahead, the danger of the situation came more home to them than it had at the time when they voted for the expedition. Nevertheless, they were heartened by the strength they had, and with the sight of the quantities of every kind of armament displayed before their eyes. When the ships were manned and everything had been taken aboard, silence was commanded by the sound of the trumpet, and the customary prayers made before putting to sea were offered up, not by each ship separately, but by them all together, following the words of a herald. The whole army had wine poured out into bowls, and officers and men made their libations from cups of gold and of silver. The crowds on the shore also, the citizens and others who wished well to the expedition, joined together in the prayers. Then, when the hymn had been sung and the libations finished, they put out to sea, first sailing out in column, and then racing each other. So they made good speed on their way to Corcyra, where the other force of their allies was assembling. And then on to Sicily.
And David Horovitch reads the final part of Thucydides, The History of the Peloponnesian War, at the same time tomorrow.